Nengi was scared. For a little girl her age, the pain she is bearing is too much. She wanted to scream, but no one would listen. She wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. Every day she felt trapped in a world where everyone else was happy, but she was drowning in fear. No one noticed the pain in her eyes. No one saw the way she flinched when she heard his name. Her closest ally was also a victim of this monster called Juma. Uncle Juma was loved by everyone in the neighborhood. He had a regular office job but was home on some days. People thought he was a good and religious man because he always prayed on time and carried his prayer bead. Since he was always around, parents trusted him. When they couldn't pick up their kids after school, they sent them to Uncle Juma's house. They believed their children were safe with him. They believed he was a good man. But they were all wrong. From every corner of the street, mothers shouted their instructions. Juma, please remind Deborah to eat her food. It's in the stainless plate, Mrs. Stella called. Uncle Juma, my boys will come straight to your house after school. Please, take care of them, Mrs. Musirat shouted. Juma, make sure my daughter Nengi is taken care of, Miss Adaku would say before rushing back to her busy restaurant. But none of them knew what kind of man Juma truly was. None of them saw the monster hiding behind his gentle smile. None of them heard the whispers he spoke when the doors were closed. It all started with Nengi. Nengi is a little girl of 5 years, going to 6. She's the daughter of Miss Adaku. Adaku, who is a single mother, had her own issues to fight. She has been divorced for 4 years. She had an issue with her husband that made them separated. It was majorly a case of domestic violence and abuse. Adaku vowed to make sure that Nengi get the best of life. She would wake up as early as 4 a.m. to start preparing for the busy customers who would start coming into her restaurants from 6 in the morning. Mrs. Adaku made sure that Nengi got everything she wanted to live at least a comfortable life in her own way. At first, it was the little things. Nengi's sudden fear of going home after school. The way she would clung to her mother's dress. Her tear-filled eyes whenever Adaku forced her to go to Uncle Juma's place. But Adaku was too busy, too overwhelmed. She thought Nengi was just being difficult. Stop acting like a spoiled child, Nengi, she scolded, dragging her daughter towards Uncle Juma's house. The fear in Nengi's eyes grew every day. But no one noticed, not her mother, not the teachers who saw her growing quieter in class and her fading energy, not the neighbors who adored Uncle Juma. Juma was that good to many people that they never ever thought of him having any flaws. Juma would often call Nengi, my wife. But those words made Nengi's skin to crawl. She wanted to run, to disappear, but no one would listen. No one saw the horror hiding behind the walls of Uncle Juma's house. One night, while Nengi and her mom were about to have dinner, Nengi summoned up the courage to approach her mom and speak to her mom. She said, Mommy, I have something to tell you. The mom was preparing dinner and she turned to look at Nengi and she asked her, my love, what is the problem? Nengi said, Mommy, Uncle Juma is not a good person. I don't like him. Is that why you refuse to go to his house anytime I ask you to go there? Please, Nengi, don't disturb me. I'm so tired. Just go and sit down. Let me prepare your dinner. Nengi turned back, and while she was heading back to sit on the bed to wait for her mom, tears streamed down her eyes. And this little girl thought to herself, who would ever believe me? Juma had secrets of his own. He had been a victim long before he became a monster. As a child, he lived with his uncle after his parents died. His uncle, a cruel and heartless man, took pleasure in controlling him, beating him for the smallest mistakes and whispering terrifying threats in his ears. Juma had learned early that pain was power, and over the years, the darkness in him grew. His uncle's torment had shaped him, twisted his soul, and turned him into something terrifying. So, the cycle of pain continued. Juma didn't just hurt Nengi. Over time, whispers began to rise, fragments of fear from other children. Deborah, Mrs. Stella's daughter suddenly refused to speak. She would wet the bed and wake up screaming at night. Mrs. Musira's voice, once playful and full of life, became withdrawn, flinching at sudden movement. The children were all having a nightmare that no one would believe when it was unveiled. But the adults were blind. Juma was a monster whose conscience was dead. He breathed and ate evil. No one knew that Juma was having his way with the boys and the girls that has been left in his care. So one evening, Adaku closed her shop and stepped outside. The air was thick with heat, and the smell of frying plantains lingered. And there was Nengi, sitting on the ground, arms wrapped around her knees, her uniform dirty, her tiny face bruised. A sharp pain shot through Adaku's chest. "What happened to you?" she gasped, kneeling in front of her daughter. Nengi flinched. Adaku grabbed her hands, shaking her gently. "Nengi, answer me. What happened?" The little girl's lips trembled, her eyes wide with terror. She was shaking, looking around as if afraid someone was watching. Then in a whisper so soft, it almost got lost in the wind, she said, "Uncle Juma said, if I tell you, he will beat me." The word stopped immediately. Adaku was looking for her breath because she couldn't breathe any longer. And she asked her daughter, "What did he do to you?" Nengi clenched the hem of her dress, her tiny fingers shaking. "Mommy, he hurts me." With tears in her eyes, she said, "And he told me that if I tell anyone, that he would kill me." A storm raged inside Adaku. It was a mixture of guilt, pain, and anger. How had she not seen it? How had she ignored the signs? The desperate way Nengi had begged, the terror in her eyes, the sadness in her voice. With a furious, shaking hand, she grabbed Nengi and stormed toward Uncle Juma's house. But as she approached, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Juma stood at his doorway, watching her. His usual smile was gone. His eyes, dark and empty, had no fear, only a quiet warning, as if daring her to act. Neighbors gathered as Adaku screamed at him, "What did you do to my child? I ask you again, what did you do to my child?" Juma did not deny it. He did not plead or run. He was indifferent. He simply stared at her, then turned to everyone to say, "You trusted me." With a hint of mockery in his voice, "You gave me your children." The words sent shivers down spines. Suddenly, as if something was activated, other children in the crowd began crying. The truth was unraveling, and it was horrifying than anyone imagined. Everyone ran to anybody who they know that was crying and started asking them questions. It was now revealed that Uncle Juma was a monster no one ever believed. Some young men in the neighborhood, out of anger, picked up stones, wood, and machetes to hack Juma to death. It wasn't long before they started beating him, but someone had called the authorities. The young men refused to release him, but they were eventually overpowered by the authorities. The police ransacked Juma's house, and they found more than they expected. Hidden beneath Juma's bed were journals, scribed confessions of his past, detailing his own abuse and the horrors he had inflicted on others. They were old faded photographs which served as trophies of his victims and those who he had stolen their innocence. It was discovered that these children weren't his first victims. He had just been caught this time. Juma was arrested, but the damage was already done. The neighborhood would never be the same. The air of trust, once so easily given, was gone. Children slept with nightmares. Parents lived with guilt. And in the silence of the night, Nengi still woke up screaming. The scars he left would take a lifetime to heal. No one ever trusted so easily. Juma was taken to court, and after being convicted, he was sent to prison. But deep down in the darkness of his prison cell, Juma sat with a cold smile on his lips, whispering words no one could hear. The monster wasn't gone. Not yet.